Welcome to another edition of the Trucking on Route 66 in Missouri Oral History Project, a collaborative initiative between the Missouri State University Libraries and OzarksAlive.com. I'm Tom Peters, Dean of Library Services at Missouri State University. My colleague on this oral history project is Caitlin McConnell from OzarksAlive.com. This project is made possible in part by a grant from the Route 66 Corridor Preservation Program of the National Park Service. Today's date is Wednesday, January 24th, 2018, and my special guest today is Lea McGinnis, who is a former truck driver who's trucked all over the lower 48, as we used to say, states, and this interview is being conducted in her home near Gravois Mills, Missouri, up by the Lake of the Ozarks. Lea, thanks very much for joining us today.
Okay, it's Gravois Mills.
Gravois.
Yes.
Okay. I apologize.
Or just Gravois.
Gravois Mills. But it is plural, so there are multiple mills.
Gravois Mills, yeah. Mills. There was more
There's
mills.
Mills.
Yeah.
Gravois.
There's none now.
Yeah.
But
where were you born?
I was born Flatlander. I was born around Wichita, Kansas.
Oh.
About 30 miles from Wichita.
Yeah, that's real flatland out
Yeah.
there. Tornado
But
Alley.
I turned hillbilly.
Uh-huh.
Just as soon as I got big enough to walk off of the flat and get in the hills.
Uh-huh. When did you move into the Ozarks region?
Well, I'm not exactly native, but I think I'm local by now.
Uh-huh.
Because I've been here over 50 years. So.
What brought you to the Ozarks?
I like the hills and trees, and
Okay.
I never was a prairie person. I was just
Uh-huh.
always a hillbilly, I guess.
Uh-huh. And did you eventually marry?
Yes, a couple times.
Okay.
That didn't work out.
Uh-huh. Well, was one of your husbands or both of your husbands truck drivers?
No.
Oh, really?
No, my first one was a horticulturist, and it was after we got a divorce that I went to truck driving school.
So you went on your own.
Yeah.
You needed a source of income. And
I had a son to raise.
yeah.
My son was, I guess he was about 10, 11 when I went on the road. He stayed with his dad for a while, and then he ended up going to my folks' house. My folks kept him
Uh-huh.
because his dad was a little on the flaky side, and
Yeah.
so.
Why did you decide to go to trucking school as opposed to any other thing?
Well, I had a craft business, and I was doing craft shows and stuff, and that year, it was kind of the economy kind of got pretty bad that year. And
What year was that, if you don't mind?
well, that's what I was trying to figure out. I think I must have
Or at least
went
a
to school in 85.
You went to school in 85. Okay.
I think so, because these pictures I've got in here, I've got 87 on some of them, and that was the trucks down the line a ways, so
Okay.
it evidently
So
was
mid-80s.
about 85 that I went to.
Okay.
But anyway,
Were you living here in
yeah, in this area,
Gravois?
Gravois Mills. Yeah.
Gravois.
Yeah.
I'll get it right eventually.
Yeah, everybody tries to make it too fancy. Everybody tries to put a French
I know.
thing
I
on
don't
it.
speak French, but I was trying to get
And the next count up is Versailles, not
Versailles.
Versailles.
All right.
It's spelled like that, but it's not. But anyway, the economy was kind of hitting the skids then, and kept looking in the newspaper, and one thing they always needed help for was over-the-road drivers. So I was like 50-ish. I go and get me a student loan to go to truck driving school.
Mm-hmm. What school
And
did you go to?
I went to Jay's truck driving school. It was in Liberty, Missouri.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think they had one down Springfield, too.
All right. Jay's.
Yeah, it was Jays.
Yeah.
It was, well, I don't know. It was kind of out on this side.
East side of Springfield, maybe?
I think so.
Yeah.
But anyway, I went to Liberty because I had a cousin and his wife that lived up there, and they said I could stay with them to go to school.
Uh-huh.
So it's 2 or 3 months
Oh,
worth
okay.
of
Okay.
You have to have so many hours in before you could graduate. So
you take both like classrooms where you're learning.
yeah, you start out in the classroom and learning the paperwork and that, you know, the paperwork, legal part of
right.
driving, and then you graduate and you go out and you drive these. We called them chili pots because that gear system, and you just kind of stir the gear shift around and find a gear, and you drive them in the lot for a long time, and it just round in circles trying to miss each other and all that. And then we had one truck that was good enough to go out on the road, so then we'd go out on the road and drive that.
And Liberty in '85, so I-35 and that kind of, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then sometime during that you have to get you well, they weren't CDLs then, they were just a chauffeur's license for something big.
Yeah.
And,
did that involve a driving test?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I aced it.
Good for you.
And
were you nervous?
No, not bad. I guess I just had delusions of grandeur that I was going to do it. And at that time, there was women driving, but not. I went on flatbed as soon as I went out there, which there wasn't that many. The biggest share of the women out there was either with their husbands or something. And they were mostly in box trailers, not flatbeds. So there wasn't a whole lot of flatbed drivers out there that was women that was running solo.
So I grew up in Iowa, up by where they mine gypsum, and I know there are a lot of flatbed trucks that carry gypsum poured.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what were you hauling as a flatbed?
Just about anything they could put on that flatbed trailer, and then you try to keep it there.
Yeah. So pipes and...
Yeah, pipes, the big rolls of metal.
Sheet metal?
Yeah, those, that's like a great big razor blade getting ready. You don't ever want to see one of them busted on the highway, because it'll just dice up everything it goes through.
Yeah, it's a huge roll, probably, I don't know, 6-8 feet across. And I think they use them for like refrigerators and, you know, that kind
just all kinds of stuff.
Washer, dryer, that's the sort of the raw material of that, and it must weigh a lot. Those things must weigh.
Because you'll have like maybe one of those on a trailer, sometimes two.
Yeah.
And so you're talking 40,000 pounds or something.
So back in '85, I'm guessing that most loads that were loaded on a flatbed were, you're using forklifts to get that stuff on there.
Yeah. And you did a lot of tarping.
Yeah.
And when I went off I started in a contractor's truck with this company, and had a problem with, I had a co-driver at that time. I started out with a co-driver.
Who was your co-driver, do you remember?
It was a knucklehead that I went to truck driving school with, which was a bad idea. And he was, well, finally I had to get all the com checks in my name, because if we went through Vegas, he'd lose our money and everything. And so anytime we had to get money to drive this guy's truck, I dealt with the money. I started picking the loads because he was flaky. I mean, and so anyway.
But still better driving with a team, or did they insist upon a team then?
Well, we was out of Kansas City, this company. They had trucks that leased on to this company. I drove for PFT out of Farmer City, Illinois, which was, well, it started out prefab transit, and then it was PFT, and then it ended up being PFT Roberson, and then I think just Roberson after I left. But anyway, it was a flatbed company, but there was contractors, guys that had tractors, that would contract on to here, and there was, this guy had 2 trucks, and he had got a team out of truck driving school, I don't know, a few months before that, and it worked out so well. This was a husband and wife team. And having a female in the truck seemed to work better because the trucks lasted longer. And so anyway, he had this other truck that he needed drivers for, and he went to the school and asked for a team again to put on this second truck.
Mm-hmm.
So the placement director, he calls me in and he says, do you know any drivers that you could drive with? And I said, I don't know any truck drivers. All I know is these wannabes out here. And he says, well, is there any of them you think you could put up with? And I said, well, yeah, there's one I think maybe I could put up with him. It didn't last too long, but anyway. So we went on. Well, this guy, we weren't making any money. And we finally run into this other couple, and they had got off of the guy's truck by then, and they'd been trying to work their way back into Kansas City at the same time we was to talk to us because this contractor was ripping us off. I mean, we weren't making no money at all.
Oh, yeah.
And he was making money because I was picking the loads,
Yeah.
and I was getting the best money, you know.
But were you paid per hour, per trip, or what? How were you paid? What was the base?
You get paid per mile usually.
Per mile.
Yeah.
Okay. And is that still the standard for trucks?
Well, per loaded mile.
Oh, all right.
When I went on company truck, I don't know for sure now what they do. When I got put on company truck, I got paid for all miles, loaded or empty.
Yeah.
But they didn't deadhead you too far.
Yeah. No,
except that.
That's bad for business, doing a lot of deadhead.
But anyway.
So let me just make sure I understand, because I've worked for wholesale companies where I got trucks coming in, but I've never driven a truck. So there was a company that was running flatbed trucks, and they were looking for loads to carry, whether it's whatever that's called, coiled steel or pipes
anything.
Or gypsum board or whatever. That's their business, is loading up those flatbed trucks and hauling this stuff. And then you got the other couple, the couple that's in business, they got 2 tractors, and they're in business hauling loads.
Mm-hmm.
And then they hired you, and you're a knucklehead.
Yeah.
to drive the second truck. So then they would say, okay, take this truck and go pick up this load and drive it here. Or you were doing that work. You were figuring out what the loads were.
I found out real quick you don't take a flatbed to California.
Really? Why?
There's no freight coming out of there for flatbed.
Oh.
They want their stuff brought in, but you get out there, especially, see, now this guy that I was driving with. We come out of there in January, and he wants to go to California, so he takes his first load to go in California. Well, we get out there, and we sat, and we sat, and we sat.
Waiting for a load back.
Yeah, we get in the terminal there, and there's probably 20, 30 trucks in just our terminal that's waiting for loads out of there.
Yeah.
And everything's so darn cheap, or it's going halfway back out into the desert. And so finally I told him, I said, we've got to take a loss on this just to get back out of here.
Yeah. So you're either spending money waiting for a load, or you're coming back empty, or you're getting a load that's only back to Vegas or somewhere.
So
Salt Lake City, or
we got a load plastic pipe, which was cheap, and hauled it halfway out into the desert, and then we deadheaded from there to Salt Lake City. At least from Salt Lake City you could get something a little bit further east, and then you learn real quick, you just don't go out there. Now if you've got a reefer, you know,
I was going to say, in talking to other truckers, if you had a reefer, usually they would carry meat to California. Some kind, back in the day, in the 80s, would have been, sometimes it was swinging, it was on hooks.
Yeah, swinging meat.
But they got out of that pretty quickly after the mid-80s. I think that they all went to boxed beef and stuff, and finished product, or semi-finished product.
Well, I had a stepmom. After my mom died, my dad remarried, and her and her husband had been a trucker. They hauled eggs to California and then brought produce back. So, that worked good for them.
So you're refrigerating both ways.
Yeah.
And the reefer drivers have said that the real money was bringing the vegetables and fruit back from California. Mm-hmm. That's where that's where the
because it's got to move.
It's got to move, and they're willing to pay to get that stuff to St. Louis or wherever, and you know, get it into the populated areas. But that's not going to happen with a flatbed.
Yeah, I had a flatbed reefer in the wintertime. Hauled swinging shrimp. You hauled in the rub rails. I had a lot of this crap on the. Well, first off, the guys hit on the CB, and if there's a female on there, you know, they're going to come up with some kind of crap. So you get your own crap to come up with. They asked me what I was driving, I'd say, cab over conventional with a flatbed reefer. What you hauling? Swinging shrimp. You haul them in the rub rails.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. So there, you know, of all the drivers in the U.S., I mean, how many were women back in the mid to late 80s? You know, less than 10%.
I don't know.
I mean, when you would stop, you wouldn't see many women, would you?
No. And what ones you did see, you didn't want to associate with usually.
So there wasn't like a sisterhood of female truckers?
Well, you get running down the road and you find another lady driver, and you get talking to her, and I think it was in Pennsylvania one time. There was 3 of us running together. One was pulling doubles, which was real unusual. Another one was carrying swinging beef, and I had a flatbed. And so we were 3 macho broads, I'll tell you. I mean, you know, there wasn't nobody going to mess with us.
This was the CB radio. That's how you communicated? Yeah. So
yeah, you had to have CB back then.
Yeah.
Especially if it was like, I just had a lot of faith in people, I guess, especially local information.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many times I have gone into, like, Chicago on Monday morning during rush hour and not knowing exactly where I'm going.
Yep.
And you get on there, and I don't know whether it was a panic in my voice or what, but I would get local information. And those guys, they were just, you really needed those people, because you get in these places, and they were good. Some of them were so good, they were like they were sitting next to you.
These are other drivers?
No, usually there's some guy sitting at home, or a kid in a pickup truck.
Yeah.
But they know every inch of that way, and they can give a driver. I mean, it's just like they're in the truck with you, telling you, okay, now on your left there's this, and on your right there's this, and okay, you see it up there? That's where you're going to turn. You're going to make a right there.
Right.
And then, I mean, you know.
They almost talk you through it.
Yeah.
Really?
Which.
In Chicago.
Yeah. And that was when I had the airfoil on top of that thing, too, where I was about 13.6, and you get a lot of places there that you don't fit through.
Yeah.
So.
How would you know what the weather was that you were looking at up ahead, especially like this time of year, if there's snow or?
Well.
Would other drivers kind of tell you, oh yeah, it's pretty bad?
Oh yeah, you're talking all the time
yeah.
About how's the roads and of course where's Smokey at and everything. I mean, you know, you did a lot of, and you knew when there was a traffic jam coming up. That's why trucks didn't end up in as bad a jams as cars did, because they knew there was something up there and they were slowing it down, you know.
Yeah, accident, and then somebody would get on. Okay, get off at this exit, and you can get around it this way.
Well, I was coming into Springfield one night. There was ice, and everybody was looking for a place to get off anyway. And there was a cattle trailer that had dumped over.
Yeah.
So we got cows running back and forth. Well, I don't think it was an 18-wheeler. I think it was just like a hot shot or a fifth wheel cattle trailer or something.
Yeah.
But we got cows running back and forth across the road. And of course all the drivers know this, that there's ice. We're trying to get stopped. And we know that there's cows running everywhere, and these people are just passing us in four-wheelers, you know, just nuts.
Yeah.
Because they didn't seem to realize that there was something going on. And it was right before wasn't that a truck stop right there at, what's that town?
West of Springfield?
No, the east. probably right.
Stratford.
Yeah, I think right along in there.
Oh, Marshfield.
Yeah. But anyway, we're trying to get stopped, and I'm just inching along. I'm going to get off there at the truck stop and find a place to park it anyway because it's so slick. You don't want to be out there.
Right.
And as I got stopped, I've got this cow snuggling up to the radiator, and I'm just kind of scooting it along because it's just, oh, it's warm. I don't know what happened to me.
Yeah.
I got slung out there somewhere, and
the cow had decided it liked your radiator. Huh?
yeah, and it's just kind of leaning up against the front of there, and I'm just kind of scooting it along. Well, we finally got the cows kind of scooted out of the way and got off, and you pull into the truck stop, and all the parking places are taken, plus a ring all the way around the parking lot, plus another ring. I mean, you just got to get off.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't. Nobody's going nowhere.
You got to park it somewhere.
Yeah. And I pull in there and I think, oh God, I can't go no farther. And this truck says, you might as well just park here beside me because there ain't none of us going nowhere till morning anyway. I said, okay, we'll just sort it out in the morning, you know, and see if we could get everybody out. But
so you were in there like sardines, huh?
Yeah.
And the cow had moved on, or somebody had lassoed it? Or?
Well, I don't know. Well, there was quite a few of them out there.
Really?
But they was going to have to do some gathering.
Now, back in the late 80s, well, how long did you drive?
I got off in 89.
Okay.
I think the last part of 89.
So about 4 years you were driving?
Yeah.
Yeah. Year round?
Yeah. And if you're a company truck, you get all the worst. You always get the north in the winter. You get the south in the summer because the contractors, they've got a choice of what. We were forced dispatch if we were a company truck.
Yeah.
If you were driving actually one of the company's trucks, then you're forced dispatch. You can't pick your loads.
Yeah.
You get whatever nobody else wants, and so the contractors will pick out the cream of the crop.
So you'd be going across the Dakotas in January and that kind of thing?
Well, that one year I got a trainee on, I can't remember, if there was ever a girl going on flatbeds that went through orientation, I was the only one they had on company trucks on flatbed, and so therefore I got them as a trainee.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got this, I only really had two. Well, I only had one, really, because the other one, I finally took her back and dumped her in the motel because I told them she wasn't going to make a driver when I've seen her.
Yeah.
And she was afraid to go from the truck to the truck stop at night without a bodyguard.
Escort.
Yeah. I says, I didn't take nobody to raise. I don't need nobody to babysit. It's rough enough out here that I don't need her. And found out she couldn't drive in the dark. She couldn't do hills. She had up her brakes going downhill empty. She shifted a load on me, a load of lumber that was going cross country, and I had to drive it the whole time. And it was scheduled as a team load. So they were figuring us driving nonstop, you know. And so we did, but I was doing all of it.
Really?
Because, well, we was going through Oklahoma, and I picked out in between chicken coops where we didn't have to go through scales or anything, because you couldn't do scales either.
What do you call way stations chicken coops?
Yeah.
Really? Are they still called chicken coops?
I have no idea. This language, well, one time, heading towards the east, I said something about the Big Creek. When you go across the Big Creek, you might as well start getting...
meaning the Mississippi?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the time I came back from the East Coast, everybody was using it, so the language just changes all the time.
Yeah.
But
way stations were known as chicken coops back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah, there was everything and if you didn't know what it was, you didn't use it on the CB until you talked to somebody you knew to find out what you're saying. A pickle park.
What's a pickle park?
Well, it's like Holly get an education too. It's like the rest areas with the restrooms.
Yeah.
But it was it had to do with gay people.
Yeah. Pickle.
And then, of course, there's lot lizards. And
Those
you've heard
are
of lot lizards before.
Prostitutes
Yeah,
that work the lots.
yeah.
So you trucked pretty much through all 48 contiguous states?
Yeah.
Florida, Maine,
Yeah.
Washington State.
I had them all whipped except Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. I hadn't done them.
Yeah.
And we delivered a lot of these John Deere tractors, like the little riding lawnmowers, and they put them in these metal frames and
Yep.
stack them up on your...
Yep. Yep.
And I knew that we picked up those in Horicon, Wisconsin, and I knew we took a lot of them up in there. So one time when I was back in Illinois, I was in dispatch, and I said, you know, I had been keeping track and collecting cups for every state. And I said, sometime if you have a load going up in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, up in that way, I wouldn't mind taking a load up there. Well, that's the wrong thing to say. Because then every time I got back that direction, I was taking tractors up in there.
Yeah.
Which is fine. It's nice territory up there, but you can't get there without going through Boston.
Yeah. Was Boston one? I was going to ask you, what was your least favorite area to go through?
Well, I've been lost in every major city in this country at least once. New York City, I didn't call it the Big Apple. I called it the Rotten Apple. And the best way to see it is in your rearview mirrors. And you're escaping.
Did you ever have to go out on Long Island?
Yes.
Really?
In fact, I think that was one of my birthdays. I think 88. Because my birthday is August the 8th, so it's 8/8/88. I had an 8 a.m. appointment. When I looked at my bills, I thought, how weird is this, you know? And it was lumber, and when I got there, there's no parking signs all along there, but they got the gates closed to where you can't get in without taking your bills in first, and I had to take a picture of that to show dispatch when they had to pay me a ticket because I'm parked in places like that.
You got ticketed for it, huh?
Well, I didn't,
Oh.
but just in case I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's to cover your tail.
Yeah.
So.
And you said you worked as a dispatcher for a while, too?
No.
Oh.
No.
Oh, okay. But you were a trainer, so what...
Oh, a trainee. Yeah, I had trainees with me.
You had trainees.
You would have another driver get on there to train.
Yeah. So what makes for a good driver? What are, you said some of them just didn't have it. What makes for a good driver?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is the first thing you want to do is keep yourself safe. That's your first job. Then your second job is to deliver freight.
Mm-hmm.
But don't never let that freight get in the way of keeping you safe out there.
Yeah.
So
what are the risks? You got the pickle parlors and, but what are the risks that you faced?
Well, I'll tell you, I had older drivers tell me when I started out that you wake up places you don't even know how you got there. I thought, yeah, not unless you get some bad road dope or something. Well, I never took anything like that. About the best I ever took was bee pollen. That stuff will keep you going.
Bee pollen?
Yeah. It helps.
Keep you awake?
No, not necessarily, but you eat bad out there. Well, I never really ate meals. I snacked.
Really?
Because if you eat a big meal, then you go to sleep. The only time you eat a big meal is when you're stuck somewhere and you don't have a load.
Yeah.
So you snack, and you don't never sleep, really. You nap. You just sleep until you can get up and go some more.
Uh-huh.
And then when you're... this sounds awful, but then when you're waiting on the load is when your logbook catches up with you.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you had to do a lot of that or you couldn't make any money.
Yeah.
But,
so back in the late 80s, how, I think today, don't they, I mean, they can tell whether your truck's moving or not.
oh, yeah.
And I don't know how many, if it's 10 hours every 24, you're supposed to be down, or, I don't know. But, I mean, now they can sort of tell what's happening.
Yeah, back then they couldn't.
Yeah, okay.
If we didn't call in, they didn't. I went and retrieved trucks that people had dumped places, company trucks, and they would just abandon them, and when they'd find them, most of the people at the dispatch offices couldn't drive trucks. They were just office personnel.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'd have to wait until they got a driver in there to go out and pick up these trucks.
So some drivers will just abandon a load, huh?
Yeah. Take a truck off and hide it, steal them.
Do loads get stolen?
No. They can. I mean, I always had I had a kingpin lock, which you could put on the fifth wheel so nobody could have gone, you know. But if we had anything, if we ever unhooked a tractor from a load, usually it was for something we were stuck over the weekend or something, and we needed one of the tractors for a car.
Uh-huh.
And so you just pulled the other load across the front of it so nobody could hook onto your trailer.
Yeah.
And then if you ever had a government load, you never unhooked from them.
Really?
Yeah, we hauled a lot of military vehicles and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And
On
there was
flatbed.
can't remember, there was a move every year. It was from Camp Lejeune to, where'd it go to? But anyway, they would haul all this equipment out for,
basic training and
Yeah.
exercises. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
and then they'd haul it all back.
Really?
So
And that was pretty good to get those government loads? They pay well, or?
Well, they evidently did because we hauled a lot of them. And we liked them because a few chains on there is all you had. You didn't have to tarp them or anything, you know.
Yeah.
And they were usually light. Usually wasn't.
Yeah.
Didn't have slide axles or nothing like that because you wasn't maxing out on your.
Oh, so a slide axle is so that you can get your weight, you can get your wheels where they need to be for whatever particular load that you're. Can you slide an axle after the flatbed is loaded?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, your trailer axles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Some of them have split axles. I mean, they're stretched out to begin with. But ours, there's pins that you push in, and then you have to keep the pins in until you slide them. You put your brakes on to
Get them.
yeah. But
So explain tarping for us. I mean, was it? If you had to tarp anything, was it kind of a big hassle?
yeah, it's a lot of work tarping a load
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
and making the tarp stay on there.
Yeah. So if you're picking up a load that needed to be tarped, someone else would load the product, whatever it was. But you as the driver were responsible for tarping it?
Mhm.
Wow.
And that's what, when I went off of the contractor truck, I had called to see about going on the company truck. And they said, yeah. So I had my ex-husband take me up to Farmer City, it was on a Sunday, and drop me off in the motel, like they told me to do. And then, of course, he came back to Missouri. So Monday morning, I go in, and they said, you can't go through orientation. I says, why? Well, he started out with this, can you throw straps over a 13.6 load? And I says, yeah. He says, can you throw the tarps up there? I says, hell no, and if I ever see a guy that can, I'm going to stay clear of him too. I says, they put that stuff on your trailer with a forklift. They put your tarps up on top with a forklift. I can climb up there and stretch them,
Yeah.
and I can throw straps over them. And that takes pretty good arm to
Yeah.
those 4-inch straps.
Yeah.
That no way I can do. Well, I can't even get this arm plumb up now, but
So in a way, you were being discriminated against as a woman, a
Mhm.
female driver. They
And
thought
that's
you
what-
couldn't do it.
and that's about the time I said something to that effect. Was when he was getting smart-ass with me, and he says, oh, well, I guess we better take you through orientation. I says, I guess maybe you better. And so,
Did you have to go through a lot of that during your time on the road? Did you get a lot of
Yeah.
lip?
well, and that's like tarping a load. My load had to be tarped better than any of the guys. A woman couldn't go along with a piece of tarp flapping without taking a lot of guff.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So mine always looked like a Christmas package. I mean, I was really good at tarping. But when I did go through orientation, they took us over to St. Louis to pick up some old reconditioned J.B. Hunt trucks that they used on their short haul. And so we get in those, and we come out of I didn't have a map with me, and I didn't know St. Louis that well, and it was clear over on the side that I hadn't been on, and we had to come around and, what is my phone doing? Anyway, we pull out on the road, and there's a whole line of us, and one of them crapped out already before we hardly got on the interstate, and another stopped with him. We had everybody that was going through orientation plus all the guys out of the shop. They'd taken a van load of people over there to bring these trucks back. Well, I had to catch up with the next one in front of me because I don't know exactly how to get back to how we came, you know. So we get off and we stop at the restaurant and wait for everybody to get gathered back up and find out what happened to all the ones that died along the way, you know.
Restaurant in Farmer City, or?
No, this was just after we got back off of the interstate, and so the smart ass from orientation said something to me. He said, "You were a little bit late coming in." I said, "Yeah, you know, if you to give us something besides those damn chili pots that would stay in gear." I said, "Every time I hit a bump, damn thing would pop out of gear."
Really?
And so, anyway, I said, "You didn't think I could drive a truck. You thought I had just been riding with a driver when I signed up for orientation." "No," I said, "no, you really didn't think I could drive a truck, did you?" Well, he finally admitted that, no, he didn't think I could. And I said, "Well, I'd have been up with everybody else if you'd give me a damn truck decent to drive, you know." But, yeah, so you went through a lot of crap.
Yeah. Would you talk to other women drivers about it, or?
Oh, I mean, we just all knew that was the way it was. You just had to be better than the guys.
Yeah.
And I was a good driver. I never was as good as I wanted to be, but for the time I spent in it, I was.
Yeah. So you drove all over. Do you have any memories of driving along Route 60 or the 66 corridor? So it'll be, 44 through Missouri and then 40 on from Oklahoma City onto the West Coast.
Well, the 44, that's where the cows was on.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep. So would you take loads from St. Louis out to the West Coast? Or do you remember any of the loads that you had? Or?
I'm not real sure that I ever picked up anything in St. Louis. I delivered there before.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I ever picked up anything there.
Fort Leonard Wood, you pick up or drop off anything at Fort Leonard Wood? Equipment or anything?
No, we went to 29 Palms.
Yeah. You remember what you were hauling?
I'm thinking that that's where the military stuff went, from Camp Lejeune to 29 Palms.
Wow.
Is that or to, what's that funny name down there in New Mexico?
Albuquerque?
No, funnier name than that.
Funnier
it's out in the
Albuquerque.
desert. It's a military thing.
So you driving all over?
Yeah.
Didn't have a regular route per se.
What?
A regular route that you'd make a run from
Oh,
Chicago to
no.
LA and back.
Hardly ever.
So you were driving unknown roads, pretty much through the.
My handle was Little Lost Hillbilly because I was lost more than I was found.
Little Lost Hillbilly.
Yeah, I got tagged that. My first solo run was a bunch of those John Deere tractors. Picked them up in Horicon, Wisconsin, and they went to Jersey, all the way along there, and try to find all these little bitty towns. And a lot of times these little tractor places are like abandoned filling stations or something. They put them in.
Yeah.
Well, you got to fit in there because they had to get a tanker in there to take gas into
Yeah.
a filling station, but it's not a real big place.
Not ideal.
That was, I think one of them went to Smicksburg, Pennsylvania. That was on a 10-ton limit road, and here I am, hoping you're not going to get caught before you get back out of there. But there was a place in Ohio that I couldn't find this town, little bitty town, and I called in, and dispatcher, we had a new dispatcher at the time, and he was a smart ass, and I tried to tell him, I said, you need to find this town for me. I said, it was like my third drop or something. And you mean you can't find it? What kind of a driver are you and everything? And he had me so upset, I was almost to tears. And if they ever get me to the tear stage, and I come through that, then watch out, because then the mean comes out.
After tears come mean.
And so finally I just hung up on him. I went back out and got in the truck, and I got on the CB. And I started talking to the guys there in the truck stop, and I said, any of you guys know where this town is? I said, I've got John Deere tractors to deliver there, and I can't find it on the map. Yeah, I had somebody come back just right away, they knew where it was.
Yeah.
And so then the next day when I called in, the same dispatcher answered, and he says, where are you? I says, well, I'm in a rest area, and on the map it says you are here. He says, well, where are you really? I says, I am here, and hung up on him again. And from then on, if he answered when I called dispatch, I wouldn't even talk to him. I'd just wait for the other dispatcher, because he made me mad.
Yeah.
And
so back when you were driving, did you rely on what they call that, the Motor Carrier's Atlas? Kind of a big road atlas that showed all the truck routes and...
Well, I had one of those, but just a regular atlas is mostly what I use.
Really?
And made me a leather cover to put over it, because
that's just a
you go through
old Rand McNally.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I thought I could read a map when I went to driving. I really learned to read a map. I learned what all those little things are, like those numbered of exits and all this, and your A's and your B's and your all of this.
Yeah.
And if I picked up I had one load that I figured was really a coast to coast, and I picked it up in the Redwoods, Northern California, and that was the load that went to Long Island, New York.
Wow.
And I figured that was a cross-country run.
That was a haul, yeah.
Yeah. But when I would get my load, then you usually go and you fuel up, and then you can take a shower and get cleaned up after you've stretched those nasty tarps.
Yeah.
And that's the last shower you're going to get until you load again, unless somebody gives you a shower card, or you want to pay $20 for one or something. I mean, you had to, you always had to put a deposit down, and sometimes I've paid as much as $20 to take a shower.
Wow.
Just because I wanted one.
Yeah, yeah.
But,
you mentioned that you hardly ever ate full meals, you just kind of snacked and stuff.
Except I'd have the buffet when I got stuck somewhere, and I could tank it away. That's back when I could eat like that and not look like this. And
did you have any, were there any truck stops or places to eat that you really remember as being just excellent?
Well, now, some of my favorite ones, I had one up in, it's in the Dakotas. I can't remember if it's North or South Dakota, but they actually had a women's bathroom that had a tub and a shower and everything.
Pretty nice.
Yeah, I mean, it was like a real people bathroom.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a shower room or something.
Yeah.
And so you always wanted to stop there if you was going that way.
Yeah. So most places they'd have a women's trucker's restroom, but it was like a men's that had been converted, or
There was a place down in Tennessee or something that didn't even have a woman's shower.
Whoa.
And I says, well, I fueled and I'm going to take a shower. And they says, well, all we've got is a men's shower. Then I said, you better go get the men's out. And then I don't know whether this was a good thing or not, but the guy that cleaned they set him on a barrel in front of the door to keep sure that the other guys stayed out, but I don't know whether maybe he seemed like he was trustworthy.
Yeah. But you needed a shower, huh?
Yeah.
And they couldn't provide a women's shower.
And then the restaurants. The guys didn't believe me until I proved it to them one time, but I said, women don't get the same service in there as men do.
Really?
And they says, well, you're a driver. I said, yeah, I've had them come in. The only reason I'm sitting in the driver's section is because they got the phones there and you got to call dispatch. So you go in, and while you're trying to get to dispatch, you go ahead and you have your coffee or your meal or your whatever, you know. And I went in this one, and waitress comes over and says, you can't sit here. I said, excuse me? She says, are you with a driver? I said, no, I ain't are with a driver. I are a driver, and I'm going to sit here. Well, I guess you can sit here then. And then, I think it was in Nashville. I got in there, I'm unloaded. Our terminal's in the truck stop. And I go up there, and they don't have a load. And I said, well, I guess I'll go down and eat then. I said, any of you guys want to come with me? And they said, well, we've already eaten, but we'll go down and get coffee. And I said, well, I was down there and tried to get some coffee, but they wouldn't refill my cup or anything. Oh, they got really good waitresses down there. I said, you want to see? So they go, and they all sat with me. They couldn't get their cups full either because I was with them.
Really? So, almost all the wait staff at truck stops in the 80s were women?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they liked being the only females in there.
Yeah.
And the drivers making over them, and so we threw a monkey wrench in it. And I always made sure as I went through the parking lot to look down, pick up rusty washers and stuff, and that's the kind of tips they got. And they had treated me that way, too.
Uh-huh. But there was real tension between the female wait staff and the female truckers.
Yeah.
Now, I'm trying to think back. So, back in the 80s, you go into a truck stop, there was a designated truckers area.
Mm-hmm.
And would you always talk to your dispatcher via what we call a landline today?
Yeah.
You would never talk on CB or...
No.
You couldn't, you know. So, you come in...
There was no cell phones.
No cell phones. CB is... I don't know what the range it was on a CB, but it was pretty much... You had to be within a certain amount of distance of the other...
Yeah, unless they had those... Oh, some of those. I could skip talk to... I was out in California one time talking to this guy in Jersey.
Really?
Or somewhere, yeah. The weather was just right, and it was skipping, yeah.
Bouncing off the stratosphere or something.
And then
so you'd have a trucker's section.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember they all had phones, you know. Almost always booths.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were just a tourist, or, you know, you sat somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
As a rule, did truckers, male truckers, did they get better service than family on vacation at a truck stop?
I don't really know because I never was a family on vacation.
So it wasn't really, you know, it's a truck stop, we're going to get a little bit better service than...
Yeah, well, it's not necessarily... Everybody says they're going to eat at a truck stop because they have better food. No, the reason trucks stop at a truck stop is because there's a place to put the damn rig out there in the parking lot.
It's all about parking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were real happy when they started coming up with Dunkin' Donuts that you could get in, and that was along the Pennsylvania Pike. Usually they'd have a Dunkin' Donut, and they'd have some kind of hamburger place, I can't remember.
Yeah.
But we could get other things besides truck stop food then.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of buffets.
Yeah, almost all.
Yeah.
Truck stops had buffets.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd eat when I'd eat a meal.
Yeah, if you didn't want to worry about falling asleep.
Yeah.
Because that's all mashed potatoes and gravy and...
Oh, all kinds of stuff. Just loaded up.
Yeah. Did you worry about your health overall between, you know, long hours driving, not the best food, you know, it's tough to eat well when you're on the road?
Well, I don't know if other women, they probably had the same problem. but like kidney infection and things like that.
Yeah.
But you can't. And I go to the doctor when I get home, and he says, "You know what you need to do?" I said, "Yeah, I'll drink more water and less coffee."
Yeah.
I said, "That water is nasty out there, a lot of it." And he says, "Well, I'll haul it with you." I said, "I'd have to pull a tanker. I'm out 5 to 6 weeks at a time."
Really?
And
You'd be on the road for a month or more.
Yes.
At a time. Wow.
Well, I got it down to like a month when I finally told my dispatcher that time, I said, "You can call my son and tell him why his mom ain't going to be there for Thanksgiving, and I haven't seen him for 6 weeks." And he says, "My God, have you been out that long?" And I says, "Yeah." And I got that dispatcher. I could tell him, "You better start working me a load towards home." And that didn't mean you go in the middle of the night and leave the next morning with a load. That meant you better unload pretty close, because I'm going to be there for a few days, and I'll tell you when I'm ready to go again. Because, there's things you have to do.
Yeah.
Well, that one time I called him and I said, that was the time I told him he could call and tell him.
Yeah.
Well, then when my ex-husband had remarried at that time and had Aaron with him down in Springfield, and he decided that I could come and see Aaron on Thanksgiving.
That you couldn't?
Yeah.
Really?
I kind of blew up.
Yeah.
And dispatch had already given me, I had loaded up fuel and everything, because I figured in the middle of the night I might just disappear and not be where they thought I was the next morning. And I thought, no, I won't do that. I'll call dispatch and tell them. And that's when I told him he could call my son. And he says, "You better head for home." So I headed from Nashville to Springfield, or to here, and got paid for it.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because dispatch told me to do it.
Does a good dispatcher sort of get a sense of, you've had enough, you need to get off the road?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our dispatchers was good. It was the company that was bad.
Yeah.
I mean, and they wouldn't humor their good drivers. They just keep sending more knuckleheads through orientation.
Really?
And it's going to be 6-8 months when you put a new driver on before they make any money for the company, either, because they're going to be lost all the time.
Yeah.
They don't know the system.
Yeah.
And I never could figure out why they wouldn't humor the good drivers they had.
They must have figured that, well, they're just, if you don't want to do it, so we'll get somebody.
You're disposable, yeah, just like a lot of companies figure,
It does,
yeah.
So why'd you stop, if you don't mind my asking?
I got all my bills paid, got caught up, and come home to finish raising my kid. But I think I was in Jersey that time when I figured my pay and wrote my checks, and I thought, there's still money left over. I had everything paid for that month, plus whatever I was getting ready to pay off. I had an extra payment in there. And I thought, finally, to this point now,
I'm ready to.
So then I started, they were direct depositing my check, because I couldn't get a post office box at that time down here, because the post office was so small. It didn't have any more boxes, so my mail had to be delivered to my mailbox, which a friend of mine had to come by and pick it up. So anyway, I started getting my money direct deposited, and when I come home and I have an extra $1,000 or something, then I take it out of the bank here and take it up and put it in the other bank. And in a savings account. And anyway, I was in Kansas. That's where I finally ended up taking my son to my folks in Kansas. And I decided I had enough to pay off my student loan. And so I called them and I said, "How much will it be if I pay it off today?" And so I wrote them a check, and I got everything caught up and got money ahead to where I had the trailer up here, but it wasn't hooked up yet.
Yeah.
I didn't have the well dug. I had to get the well dug and all that. And So anyway, when I finally got everything caught up and had enough I thought, get us halfway situated.
Well, this certainly is a beautiful spot. It's a great spot.
Yeah, it's gone downhill these last few years since I'm not able to take care of it. And really, this last year especially, I haven't been able to do crap.
Recuperating from your fall.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you ever miss being on the road once you got off?
No, but I took a couple of trips out Route 66.
Did you?
After, and went to all the places that I couldn't get into with a truck.
Was that tantalizing when you'd be out driving a truck and you'd say, I can't, oh, there's the Grand Canyon, or there's, Yosemite, or...
Didn't do that, but I did Niagara Falls. When there's Niagara Falls.
In a truck.
Well, I don't have the truck there.
But you were in a truck. You were driving a truck, and you're going.
Yeah, that was one of them times we had to unhook from one of the tractors so we could get down there. But yeah, these is all my.
Did you go on the Canadian side?
No.
Never drove internationally.
Well, that was my first one that I drove solo. That was
so there was a bunk back there. You could sleep back there.
Yeah.
They've gotten pretty elaborate today. They got.
Yeah. Well.
Mind if I just flip through, or?
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I drove 5 different trucks while I was.
You ever have an accident?
I had a smooshy thing.
Other than
kind of smooshy the car.
Other than the cow?
Oh, yeah, that don't count. I got blamed for a light pole, and I didn't do that one.
Yeah.
Oh.
The heck is that load? Trees?
Yeah, those went up to Kansas City to a shopping center. Bald and burlap trees. That's why I said you haul anything they can put on there and you try to keep it there.
Keeping notes from shifting was probably quite a challenge. Any weather, big events, I guess flatbed is probably, you don't worry too much about crosswinds and yeah.
Got out on Salt Lake City. Well, come across the Salt Lake.
So is that you in front of?
There. No, that's my niece.
I was going to say, you were...
That's what my truck looked like. That was when I pulled into Kansas. All the dogs and the kids come to see what I had in the truck. And that's my dad standing over there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's my son.
June of 87.
And that was the co-driver. That was the good co-driver, and that was our 2 trucks there. We had matching trucks.
So you never, once you stopped, you didn't miss it too much?
No.
But you did take a couple of trips in your car? Down Route 66?
Yeah.
Why did you choose Route 66?
Oh, well, I've always had a thing about Route 66 anyway.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that Susan had written a book on it until I met her over goat cheese. I was over at Osage Beach. That's why I have met people at the weirdest ways. But I was doing the farmer's market over at Osage Beach, and that's when I was milking my goats. And I was making goat cheese and selling goat milk and other stuff too. And she bought some cheese from me, and I found out that she lived just down here. Well, and then at that time, Joel, her husband, was community betterment thing or something that he was in, and my son had interviewed him because my son worked at the newspaper at the time. So anyway, we kind of all got to know each other that way. Then I found out later that she'd done the Route 66 thing.
Yeah. I think that was late 80s, wasn't it?
I think that first one, yeah, it's around here somewhere. Then I got her new one, too, finally.
Yeah. The Cyrus Avery book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking some time to talk to me about this, and you have a lot of good stories to tell about trucking in the 80s.
I come up with some pretty good stuff anyway. That's my
Yeah,
sister's boy saying that I ought to be writing a book. I said, no, I need to dictate it to somebody because I can tell them, but I just can't write it down.
Yeah. Well, you've got a lot of good experiences, and so a question, one last question, maybe. I don't know, maybe but when I was working in a food warehouse, I had an opportunity to ride with a driver out to California, and I was looking forward to it because then I get a sense of what that was like. And then it fell through at the last minute for some reason. I don't know, But do you listen to the radio? What do you do when you're going down the road, or is it all about the CB chatter?
Well, it was back then. I
Yeah.
don't know what they do now since
Yeah.
they got cell phones and everything.
Do you sing? Or?
Well, if I ever knew I was going into one of our shops, I would have a day or two to, if they were going to service my truck. We had a shop in Columbus, and one in Little Rock, and one in Farmer City. So if I was ever getting close around there and my truck needed service, they'd send me in there. Well, the mechanics, that was another fun thing. So,
They'd razz you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have to have good comebacks for them.
Yeah.
And so my trucks always had names. I always named them. And sometimes...
What were some of the names of your trucks?
Well, Putsy was the little...
Putsy?
Putsy, because she just putsied along.
Putsy.
It had a cat's engine in it. It'll... Going across the salt flats or going up a mountain, we did 55. It had been cut back to... It would only do 55. Didn't make any difference where he was. I had cramps in my leg the first week that I drove because I keep pushing trying to get more out of it. Because I'd come out of a large car, a really walk-in sleeper Ford that was a 400 cat engine in it, and it would pass anything. And
so there's no equivalent of cruise control on a truck.
Yeah, there I think it was, but
you never used it.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
And of course they got automatics now, which they didn't then. It was all shifting, so you did a lot of I'll give you secondhand smoke.
No, I'm just something. I've got some kind of.
But now I've got derailed again. What was I talking about before I got on that?
The service bay people.
Oh yeah. Well, I always name my trucks, so some of them was girl names, some of them was boy names. And so I went in this one shop, and they had this kid, really, that was in charge of our shop in Columbus. And he was kind of a smart ass anyway, so I always had to have something good to tell him. So I went in, and I had a new truck, and he says, what's his name? And I says, Bartholomew. He says, well, how do you tell whether it's a boy truck or a girl truck? And I says, and you call yourself a mechanic, and you can't tell the sex of a truck, I'll be damned if I'm going to tell. Well, it was their personality is what given, because this was bouncing, bucking, beating Bartholomew. That was the roughest damn truck I ever rode in. And then I had math. My last one was math.
Math?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or arithmetic, whichever you wanted,
Oh,
because the truck was math, and the trailer, I said, always looked like aftermath anyway. But it was just one problem after another.
Really?
Because it just, well, before I had 1,000 miles on it, I got shut down, and they towed it into a Freightliner dealer because it had a steering gear or something that was defective on them.
Yeah.
And they were just brand new. And they didn't have enough parts to replace. They was calling them in from...
Oh, it's like a recall.
Oh yeah, thousands of them. And so I just went ahead and took a month off.
Yeah.
And then went back and picked up my truck because I wasn't going to drive any of that crap they had in the yard.
Yeah.
But, and then I told them one time to check the air in my fifth wheel. And I tell them to, I needed a new ruler. says, what do you need a ruler for, your logbook? And I says, no, it says in there you're supposed to check how many pounds per square inch them tires have every morning, and so I got to weigh them and measure them every morning, and so I need a new ruler. But just to see how damn gullible they were, because they thought I was.
Yeah.
But I'd go in and I'd tell them something was wrong with the truck, and they says, well, what's the matter with it? I says, I don't know. I'm just telling you. When you spend 24 hours a day in one of those, you know it's not sounding right or acting right.
Yeah.
And your job is to figure out what it is and fix it.
Yeah.
But I can tell you something is wrong with it.
But you could always tell when something wasn't right.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, you know, in the winter, you're 24 hours a day they're running. You don't never shut them off.
Yeah.
There was even places up north you wouldn't shut them off to fuel them because you figured the damn things would start freezing up and you never get them started again.
Yeah.
So, and then in the summer, you're running them 24 hours a day for air conditioning. Yeah.
Yeah. But you always had air conditioning in your cab?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only time is after I got off of the road. I took a load of firewood out to Colorado in a junker damn truck. Only made one load, or one run.
Mm-hmm.
I took that out and picked up soybeans, dropped that off in Kansas, and picked up wheat, and left it up to Kansas City. Well, no, I was supposed to unload it up to Kansas City, and I brought it back to Versailles and left it behind the filling station where I picked the truck up and told the guy he could find somebody else to take it back up there. I wasn't used to driving a pile of crap.
But each tractor had its own kind of personality.
Yeah, and I had new trucks after that.
Yeah.
Volvo white. Then after that, they got about 10 trucks a year.
Is there a break-in period on a new truck?
Well, they have to just keep adding to the fleet, you know, because some of them are gonna crap out. But and then that was another thing. The guy said, "See, I had one of the new trucks. How do you rate a new truck?" I says, "Well, you do 100,000 miles this year, and you'll be up for a new truck." So it definitely went on miles.
Wow. Well, thanks very much
for
taking time. So we've been speaking with Lea McGinnis in her home near Gravois Mills.
Got it.
I learned something. Thanks very much.
Uh-huh.